First of all, I'd like to thank Michael for making this trip to UDC, and as in your presentation, you are a true witness to the growth of the industry. You're a thought leader in our industry, and it's very interesting to follow your story, to understand what happened over the past 10 years or so. I have a bunch of questions. I think 20 minutes is not going to do justice. But let me start off. You mentioned that you kind of highlighted the dangers of the current highly centralized internet system, and you emphasized the importance of third generation internet. And so what are your thoughts on the adaptation of Web3?
Yeah, so I mean, I think one of the challenges that we face and have faced even before the arrival of blockchain, when it comes to trying to compete with the existing systems, Meta, Facebook, Google, and so forth, is that it's very hard to get the average person to migrate away from all of the convenience that comes from those systems. So we can talk about the reason to, for privacy purposes, the risks that come from data that's being essentially absorbed and used against you. I mean, there's an important line from Bruce Schneider, a leading cryptographer and security expert, who said some time ago, and some of you would have heard this quote, you are not Facebook's customer, you are Facebook's product, right? That you're being manipulated, essentially, by them controlling your data and building. That is a very unhealthy way to run an economy, and an even more unhealthy way to run an information system. So Frank McCourt and I wrote a book about this earlier this year called Our Biggest Fight, which really talks about the imperative of doing this. But for all of the, screaming about how dangerous it is and how bad it is for society, people are just like, well, you know what? It doesn't matter. I've got nothing to hide. I don't care about my privacy. And they don't understand all of the sort of the bigger aspects. So I think that's why that was changing. But even if they do understand it, it's hard because it's so much easier to stay on Facebook where all of my friends are. So we need to be thinking hard about how, if you want adoption, you have to make these applications be not only better from a moral or imperative perspective, but also to be really cool, and engaging and fun. And so this is where the attention is going to have to go. Now, I will say we're going to be talking about AI ahead of this, but AI does change the dynamics because the web itself, the very first expression, Web 3.0, is a little anachronistic, because in my mind the web is going to disappear because AI agents are going to act on our behalf. We're going to build these machines that will trade for us, buy our clothes for us, decide on what education. There is this world that will emerge fairly quickly of some machine acting on your behalf. Now those machines have to be trusted, and that's where blockchain can come into this. But at the same time, those machines do not need websites. They don't read human readable, they read machine readable things. So one can imagine the web itself going away. But I do think that there's an opportunity within there to really get people to think about the value of these blockchain-based systems, because an AI agent that is operating on my behalf and placing trades on my behalf and buying things and really being me, an agent in that true sense, I damn well better understand, that it's actually working for me. I need to know what's underneath that, and that data provenance part of the blockchain is really, really important to that. So there's an opportunity to make these things quite viable.
If I understand you correctly, I've been hearing from Web3 service providers that the biggest challenge for them is the usability, the UX, UI. It's very inconvenient to use Web3 services. And you're saying that the AI agent will act as a kind of interface between the web and the user itself.
So I think it's really interesting, right? So it's absolutely spot on point that the UX has been very difficult, especially for cross-chain transactions. But remember, this is also difficult in the existing web, when you have to take your contact list from Google and shift it into your Spotify list, right? There's a lack of interoperability across all these platforms because they're all siloed, they're all black boxes. And we've tended to think in the Web3 world of saying, how do we fix the protocols? How do we make sure that they all interface? But the problem is a human one, right? It creates a brain space problem for us. There's the friction involved in having to make these decisions and understanding what to do and remembering all the steps. AI agent would just make all that go away because they don't. A computer's not going to care about the complexity of all of that. So the solution may not lie in making all the protocols interoperate, creating cross-chain, and out. They might just leave it as it is. But the AI agent abstracts away all of that. And so that may be actually one of the ways to solve some of these problems.
Interesting. We'll come back to the AI subject in a moment, but your experience with consensus. You've been the chairman of consensus. Tell me about your experiences with that event. It's the largest event in the industry.
So, I mean, I've written a number of books in this space. I wrote with Paul Feener, I mentioned earlier, we wrote The Age of Cryptocurrency in 2015, and then in 2018 we wrote a book called The Truth Machine. And in that book then, that was only after there'd been four consensuses at that point, I used consensus as a way to describe the pathways of the industry. It's been a very useful event to sort of say, okay, where are things at? It's like the compass test checking. But it's also a measure of its rise, because the very first consensus was 500 people at an event in New York. And at that stage, CoinDesk, we need to diversify our revenues because the advertising budgets had fallen. This was when the Bitcoin price had fallen. Nobody was buying mining machines and rigs anymore. You used to sell those and buy them on CoinDesk. So where do we get our money from? They launched the first consensus. And at that point, it was talking about enterprise blockchain, right? We had all these banks, DTCC, we had the supply chain conversation, everything. And Citibank Ventures came in and funded the initial consensus. So it was an early foray into the space from Citibank. And ironically, Citi ended up really not doing a lot more with it after that. But that was the beginning of it. And then we had 1,500 the next year, and then we had 4,000 the next. And then in 2018 was a peak moment. 8,000 people into the Hilton in New York. The escalators were jammed, you couldn't get up there. It was a scaling problem, another scaling problem for consensus itself. Somebody thought it was a good idea to buy out the parking space out the front of the conference and put two Lamborghinis sitting in there. So there were articles in all of the New York magazines about these horrible crypto bros and their excessive behavior. And then sure enough, as often happens at consensus, pretty much immediately afterwards, that is the peak, and boom, it fell down. We had the collapse. And then we had COVID, right? And as I said, I started at CoinDesk at that point, and we had to take it all into an online environment because we couldn't have live events. And then I think the most memorable one for me was 2022 when we went to Austin for the first time. We realized we had to move out of New York to do something bigger. We had 20,000 people, and that was a hugely uplifting event. We were very, very proud of what we achieved. It was it was very positive, very uplifting. But the very next morning, I remember looking at my phone, and the first thing I read was that Celsius, one of the big exchanges at that time, or the lending platform, was cancelling withdrawals.
Oh no.
And so we had a contagion crisis underway, and one thing led to another, and a few months later, CoinDesk itself was breaking the news of FTX's problems, and we were going into an even deeper spiral. So consensus has this weird role of being there at the booms and busts. But it's a great event. It's one that I think I'm very proud of, because I like to talk about it as being the gathering of the tribes, right? It's the one big tent event when everybody who's all arguing and fighting and going off in different directions and really not necessarily paying a lot of attention comes together and tries to figure out what's going on and sort of course corrects and moves on. So I think it's, as I said, I mean, my new organization as well, I'm a big believer in convening, in making sure that you have all of the mechanisms for building community, for opening conversation, for opening dialogue, and that out of that we can build better, more reliable, or interoperable systems. So consensus in some respects is this large version of trying to achieve that through the gathering of the tribes.
We've been having UDC for the past 7 years, and my experience is that the themes change every year.
Yeah.
First it was POW versus POS, and then we had NFT suddenly on the rise, and that was very hot. And today, it's RWA.
Yeah.
Did you see that also?
Absolutely. There's always some theme that is different, some new hot thing. and yeah, I think that's the nice thing about having an annual event. I mean, this wouldn't be the case in any other industry because things wouldn't change from year to year as quickly, right? It just shows how fast things move. I mean, we talk about, I think, crypto time being considerably shorter than normal time, you know, because it's like you live a lifetime in the 12 years that I've been doing this. The change is just so rapid.
Very conveniently, UDC today is open after the US presidential elections, and you know, we have to talk about this. You don't like it or not?
I say the elections are the elephant in the room. I'm not describing any human being on either side of the aisle as an elephant, but I'm saying that it is the topic that we do need to talk about for sure.
And we're feeling the effects of
Absolutely.
the new incoming government in the US. What do you think? Is this a fad? Is it going to go away, or do you think it's impacts on the long term?
It's definitely more than a fad, right? I think it's undeniable that the regulatory constraints that have been placed on this industry under the prior administration are were quite harmful, certainly in the United States, to the ability to build. You see so many financial institutions that want to get involved, that are very concerned about the compliance risk associated with that. If you remove that overhang, I think you have a much better chance of bringing in mainstream organizations and banks into this space, and therefore locking up or unlocking capital and enabling a much bigger opening up of the system. But I do think that we need to be wary of, again, it's the same thing, investing all of our hope in one entity or one person, right? Whether it's Sam Bankman-Fried or Mt. Gox or Donald Trump. They are not our saviors, right? And their interest not necessarily in saving us. We have to save ourselves, right? We've got to build systems that are anti-fragile, that can survive no matter what. And I think that we need to be a little careful about putting all of our eggs in one basket. And I don't know that it's very healthy to have the richest human being in the world sitting in government, as much as we may or may not love Elon Musk. It's the same problem, right? He's one person. We believe in this technology because it is not reliant on human beings, right? So I think these are the things to think about. The other thing I would say is that, between now and the end of the second Trump administration's term, the world is going to look very, very different. We have never had a transformational technology like AI come in at the beginning of a presidential election term like this and see such change. And so I certainly didn't hear much from either of the candidates talking about what they were going to do to ensure that AI is safe for humans and that AI allows for positive innovation for the sake of the planet, and then what they're going to do about the challenges to jobs and everything else, right? And I think that's the thing to think about here is like, okay, we've solved yesterday's problem of what the regulatory framework for crypto assets is, but how do we solve for tomorrow's problem, which is coming at us very, very fast? And I think it's fundamental that we look at the AI problem through the lens of blockchain. Whether or not it is the magic bullet is a different question, but I would really like to see the policy direction here start to think hard about what that means.
Mm-hmm. This kind of leads to a natural transition into the subject of blockchain and AI and how they can come together. It seems that people were talking about blockchain, how it will change the future, and all of a sudden everybody's talking about AI. How do these two come together, do you think? And because of the inherent dangers or threats that AI can pose, how can we overcome that?
Well, first of all, I just say, I think it's kind of silly that we compartmentalize everything as we do. I think we humans want to have very easily classifiable constructs with which to think about the world, to direct our investments, and to make decisions. But the idea that somehow AI is a distinct thing from blockchain, I mean, they are different technologies, but that, there are all these VCs that when the Web3 bubble burst, they were all saying, I'm no longer investing in Web3, I'm investing in AI. So, well, why can't they be mutually exclusive? Why do they have to be mutually exclusive? Why isn't there a connection? And I fundamentally believe that there is. And again, it comes from thinking about Web 2. So Web 2 is this concentration of power in the hands of centralized, trusted entities. You know, Meta, Alphabet, we keep talking about them, these same entities, the most powerful organizations the world has ever seen. And the most powerful not just because they're wealthy, but because they own our data. And your data is who you are as a digital age. The footprints you leave around the world, the followers that you have, the friends that you make, connections that you draw, all of that is a direct expression of you as a human being. Your data is your personhood. So the idea that these 6 platforms could own that and control that and manipulate that without us knowing is extremely dangerous, and as I said, I wrote a book talking about the harm that that has done. We've got suicide rates amongst children and teens higher than we've ever seen before. We've got a whole host of problems. It's not to say that social media is bad, that the internet is bad, but rather that the model that's been created, which has an incentive built around it to obviously to turn as much profit as they can, is not the right model to have. We need one that is incentivized differently. So this is where blockchain comes in, because blockchain is a very different paradigm. It's a structure that says, you know, the ownership is shared. Right? We tokenize things and we get to broaden the ownership. And so the idea that we would collectively own this is better. So as we are going through this process of taking the Web 2 technology, which by the way is also AI, right? These are algorithms that Facebook and Google were running. Google is an algorithmic search process. It's not really even search. It's an algorithm that is prioritizing information as to what it thinks we need. So we're taking that algorithmic world and we're moving into a faster and bigger and more dangerous one. Why on earth would we take the Web 2 structure that we have now and put it into that world? It would be the most dangerous, stupid thing in the world. So we really need to think hard about what the incentive structures are for the AI economy. And as I said, I think tokenizing ownership of the compute that goes into this, the ability to have ownership of your data and be able to track where that data is going and know that what your data is, what data you've contributed to a model that's being developed is being used as you would want it to be. All of that I think is very, very important. And look, to be clear, it's not easy because AI depends upon a massive amount of compute, right? It brings together these high-powered NVIDIA H100 and now H200 chips, clusters them into these data centers and generates an enormous amount of information through this massive data throughput. And it's hard to do that in blockchain because distributed computation is very expensive. But the beauty about this industry is that these are the smartest people anywhere, and they're very good at thinking outside of the box. So rather than thinking about how do I jam more computation into this system, they're thinking about different models. Maybe we don't do the same LLM foundational model that OpenAI is doing. We have parallel compute, or we use modular situations, and all of that allows us to then think differently about how we can apply the blockchain to this. I also think that payments are going to have to be very important in the AI age. How is an AI going to trade with another AI? If not, are they going to wait to settle until the banks open on Monday, and then make sure that the deal gets done at 5? These are AIs that they can easily front-run each other, right? We need atomic swap capability, we need online, on-chain settlement, and we need transparency around how all those things are working. So smart contracts, I think, are going to be fundamental to the emergence of these AI agents. And AI agents are where things are going, right? So there's this idea that we're going to build 1 billion of these things. Every one of us is going to have this agent, or maybe more than one agent, that operates on our behalf. There's no way that massive pool of computational activity could pass through this one data center in the middle of it. We're going to have to push the compute out to the edges. We're going to have our devices, our televisions, our iPhones, our galaxies, all of them talking to each other and doing it locally. Now, the question is, are we going to be able to collectively own that ourselves? And so that process is now tokenized and belongs to everybody? Or will it be owned by one of those big 7 players? Because we're going to want those agents to act as agents under the legal construct of what that is. They need to be representing us. So I think this is a do or die moment. We really need to push hard for how do we bring blockchain and crypto thinking into the future of AI.
I know we're running out of time, but a quick question about compliance. Digital assets have become more mainstream, And new challenges such as anti-money laundering and fraud detection systems are becoming an issue. And Dunamu, our company, has partnered with Hanabank to share AML FDS practices. However, there no doubt that the industry is evolving. Now, how do you think that will impact the future of blockchain?
So, I mean, it's unavoidable, right? I think it's hard that we can think of these sort of big, expansive, converged worlds of blockchain and IoT and AI without trying to grapple with the questions of identity and privacy, which then go against some of the requirements of AML and KYC. But I do think that there's a real opportunity, if you're going to be creative around this, to try to make sure that the old world and the new world can actually work together. And I think that some of the interesting projects around self-sovereign identity and like KYC bureaus and the idea that we can bring a lot of that KYC process on-chain and bring privacy, zero-knowledge proofs and so forth into it. So that yes, there's going to have to be somebody that's checking that you are who you say you are, but we're not broadcasting that to the world and enabling a much more kind of cryptography-based model behind it. If we can get that right, then we can keep the regulators happy and the banks happy, but at the same time build some very exciting new technologies for the future.
Thank you.